the Clippers are in a good spot though, because you know, even before Kawhi got there, we're going back to the Chris Paul, Blake Griffin years. All this pressure when the Lakers were down for a good 8, 9, almost 10 years. That you know, this is they were the lead dogs in the city, and they never met the expectations. Now, granted, I mean, you had some all time great teams to deal with. Of course, the Warriors and the Spurs and all that. And then even last year, when they get Kawhi and you had that team with Paul George and everybody, and then they, you saw what happened in the playoffs, obviously in the bubble. But look, we're gonna find out in the months to come if it plays out well for them. But I kind of feel like, and I felt this way even during free agency too, that maybe what happened last year was kind of a good thing because now they're back under the radars. Lakers town again. Everybody, LeBron, AD, and all that. But I feel like maybe that's a good thing because they're number 2 in the West, and no one's really expect them to win a title. Like if you ask anybody, they'll say the Lakers. Maybe it's a good spot to be in, actually, to be the underdogs instead of being the favorites.
I totally agree. I think that it's better for them to play with that chip on their shoulder and basically have everyone counting them out. Because I mean, no matter where you look, I mean, this year it's like everybody is saying, like you said before, Lakers are bust. So I mean, people have already written off the Clippers, and I think not only from a motivation standpoint, but you're right, it doesn't give them that added pressure. I don't think people will look at it and say Paul George has to do this in the playoffs. Like everybody is under the assumption that it's just going to be the Lakers to lose, and they have a good team. I mean, like they last year, people were saying that they could beat the Lakers, and I think maybe that pressure did them in a little bit. But I mean, if you look at them now, I mean, yes, they lost Harold, but I mean, you could make the argument, even though I don't know that Ibaka has played that well, but like Serge Ibaka was a good pickup for them. I mean, he was a guy that a lot of teams were hoping to sign, and I think he gives them an element that they didn't have last year. Uh, Even though I don't know that he's been maybe the reliable spark that they would have thought, but I mean, he's still a good player, and I mean, they still have a lot of good players around them. I mean, it's going to be important. Like Patrick Beverly always seems like he's hurt to me. Like he's going to be so important for them because, like,
Yeah, he's always on overdrive. It's like in gear 8.
yeah,
It's only. I mean, the thing is that if you're on gear 8 from game 1, that's not going to sustain itself. I mean, you got to kind of pace yourself. He has a problem with pacing.
true, absolutely. But I mean, like when we were talking about the game earlier, having 150 points scored, like having a guy that can play defense, like a lot of these games and series might come down to who can play a little bit of defense, who can stop the team just a little bit. And if you have a guy like that, in addition to having Kawhi and Paul George, I mean, that's a pretty lethal perimeter defense. So, I mean, that's where I think their advantage is that they have the ability to go out and maybe slow down some other teams. I mean, the offenses are so good now, but I mean, I think that when you have guys who are willing to play defense, I mean, look, I mean, the Lakers won a game last weekend, 96-95. And then, the next night, the Nets played a game that was 149-146 in regulation. So, I mean,
Right.
there's definitely a benefit to being able to get stops. And I think that what's in the Clippers' advantage and also the Lakers' advantage, but I mean, the Clippers, since we're talking about them, is that they have the guys necessary to go out and guard.
And I'll be honest with you. Like, it is possible they could have beaten the Lakers last year, too. We just
Sure.
going to see it because Denver, stole the lunch,
Yeah.
So, I mean, and the Clippers do. Let's be real here. I know it's regular season, but that's a sample we do have, and the sample we do have is that they do match up well with the Lakers. I'm not saying they're going to beat them this year. I'm just saying that if given the opportunity, I'm not going to give that a just a Lakers series win. I'm not going to say that it's guaranteed because the Clippers do match up well. They just got to get to the spot to do it.
Yeah, so much of sports is matchups, right? I mean, like especially
Exactly.
when you look at football, like I mean, you could have one dominant team that just doesn't match up well with another team. Same thing as last year. I mean, the Nuggets were not a good, or I should say, the Lakers were not a good matchup for the Nuggets. I mean, like that wasn't, um, they didn't really have the guys necessary to guard AD or guard LeBron. Because I mean, like Jokic, for as talented and amazing as he is on offense, like he's not a defensive player.
No.
So I mean, if you're asking him to run out to the perimeter and guard AD, I mean, like that's just not a good matchup for them. But like you're,
That's why I keep saying like everybody keeps saying Denver, Denver. Like that's cute. They have nobody to stop LeBron. Nobody
yeah,
or
yeah,
AD for that matter.
yeah, or any of the other guys for that
Kind of
matter. So
important. That's kind of important to shut them
yeah,
down. The Clippers at least have that.
yeah, the Clippers definitely do, and I think that's why it's pretty common thinking that like, okay, it's the Lakers, the Clippers, and everybody else is a notch below. Whether
Right.
it's Utah, whether it's Denver, even if Portland ever gets healthy at some point, all those teams are going to be a notch below the two LA teams.